Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Sunday morning program of the Northern Virginia Baha'i Center. I'd like to wish all our mothers here a happy Mother's Day. We invite you to keep your camera on so that our speaker can see you and gauge your reactions. You will be muted by the host for the talk. You can raise your hand to be unmuted if you have questions. At this time, we will begin with our devotions. We'd like to remind you that the program is being recorded. The recording should be available on the Northern Virginia Baha'i Center website by the end of the week. Also, anything that you type to everyone in the chat will be visible on the recording. Our speaker today is Faith Holmes. Faith has embarked on a journey of exploring the intersection of science and spirituality, doing a deep dive into the works of Dr. Joe Dispenza. She has always been greatly fascinated by the teachings of the Baha'i faith around how we create our reality with our thoughts. Upon discovering the works of Dr. Dispenza, Greg Braden, Trevin Mowand, and Bruce Lipton, her life took on a new path. She was finally able to connect a major tenet of the Baha'i faith, the harmony of science and religion with scientific research. She has been offering lectures and coaching around meditation, mindfulness, and living a life of coherence, and very specifically looking at how we are creators of our own reality and not the victim of our circumstances. Her talk today is titled, "The Reality of Man is in His Thought." So this morning, all the way from, I believe, South Dakota, please welcome Faith Holmes.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And I want to thank the Northern Virginia Baha'i community for having me. And Ismail, thank you for reaching out to me and providing me this honor. First and foremost, I want to wish all the mothers a very happy Mother's Day. That you are all here today to take part in this, as I'm honored by your presence. And I want to especially take a moment to honor my own mother, Cindy Ketches, who is on this call, and I am calling you from her home. So it's a beautiful opportunity for me to spend Mother's Day with her. And I am calling in this morning from Pine Ridge Indian Reservation on the Oglala Lakota County lands. So I want to take a moment to make sure to, I'm going to share my screen and get into our discussion this morning. As Sandra pointed out, I've taken a deep dive over the last couple of years into how it is that we create our reality. And a little bit of background information on me. My mother found out about the Baha'i faith when she was pregnant with me. So I grew up in the Baha'i community. Wasn't quite sure about my own spiritual path, but when I was 16 years old, it became very clear that I am a Baha'i. And I had heard a quote from Abdul Baha since my early teens, where he said, "The reality of man is his thought." And I thought that that was spiritual and esoteric and kind of somewhere outside of myself, somewhere in the mystical woo-woo world, if you will. But through my own trials and tribulations, I realized that that quote was quite literal. So I'm going to get started on the presentation this morning. And first and foremost, I want to honor the lands that I am calling you from and speaking to you from. I am currently on the Oglala Lakota County lands. And you know, what has happened to the indigenous people in this country is truly a crime. And I wanted to point out, this is a beautiful artistic piece from my dear friend Arya Badian. And I feel like art can say so much. Often what many books are written about, one little art piece can really tell you a lot about. In 1851, the lands that were bequeathed to the Lakota people, you can see they're highlighted on the left-hand side in red. This was their land. So the fact that the United States government felt like they could come and take their lands or put together lands that belonged to them when it was theirs in the first place. When we talk about crimes against humanity, we can really look at that. Only a few years later, in 1868, you can see the lands that the government then said were their lands. They also said in that treaty of 1868 that the Black Hills would forever belong to the Lakota people. And yet in the 1870s, they found gold in the Black Hills and took the Black Hills back. And farthest to the right, just a year ago in 2020, you can see the lands that belong to the Lakota people today. So to honor and pay homage and respect to the Lakota people is very, very important. As I mentioned, this conversation is called The Reality of Man as His Thought, an exploration of prayer, mindfulness, and meditation. And I want to kind of set the stage by saying that when I was at my lowest point through tests, trials, and difficulties is when I realized what this quote truly meant. So I'm going to share a quote from Abdu'l-Baha that talks about tests. This quote says, "The mind and spirit of man advance when he is tried by suffering. The more the ground is plowed, the better the seed will grow, the better the harvest will be. Just as the plow furrows the earth deeply, purifying it of weeds and thistles, so suffering and tribulation free man from the petty affairs of this worldly life, until he arrives at a state of complete detachment. His attitude in this world will be that of divine happiness. Man is, so to speak, unripe. The heat of the fire of suffering will mature him. Look back to the times past, and you will find that the greatest of men have suffered the most." So I have been an entrepreneur for the past 10 years. In 2011, I started my own business at the DC Convention Center. I was the first person to bring homemade ice cream using liquid nitrogen to make it right in front of you to the northeastern states. And it was something that I was very passionate about. I loved. Before my life in ice cream and the food service at the DC Convention Center, in 2000, I created a nonprofit organization called Oneness. Our mission was to eliminate racism and promote the oneness of humanity through music, the arts, and education. And I've always been passionate about human rights and very specifically race relations in America. And so I embarked on a new journey and I created a business and it was doing quite well. And every time someone came to the convention center and had one of my smoothies or one of my ice creams, they were like, "This is the best I've ever had. Where can you get it when you're not open here?" And I was only open about 100 days out of the year because that's when we had events at the convention center. And I decided that I wanted to open a cafe. And I was very passionate and very excited because I felt like it was the opportunity for me to marry my two passions of bringing people together and creating space to build community while offering delicious, nutritious foods made by love. And I really do feel that love is an actual ingredient in our food. And Julie Walker has been quoted as being said that love is the only nutrient in the universe that can be expressed. And I really, truly can see how love impacts the world that we live in. And it is a physical, literal thing. And science is proving it today. So it's not just something spiritual and esoteric or a good thought. We actually have scientific tests that back this up. So I came together with a dear friend. We opened this cafe together, and sadly, it took me down. It was open for 4 years. We opened in 2014, and the location didn't end up being the right location. And There were major issues with staffing. There was a major issue with the lease. There just seemed to be, the first 2 years, I really believed I could, first 2.5 years, I really believed I could make it work. We were growing, but just not fast enough. And in 1 week's period, I lost my ice cream pasteurizer, which was my most expensive piece of equipment. I then lost my ice maker went down. A week later, my espresso machine broke, and I'm a cafe. So to have a coffee shop that does not provide espresso, now, mind you, all this time, I don't have enough money I'm robbing from Peter to pay Paul constantly. My other business at the convention center was subsidizing this business, and everything was falling apart. And it was during this time that I was introduced to Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he really talks about how we create our reality. So again, growing up and hearing Abdul Baha say, the reality of man is his thought, and having Dr. Joe Dispenza provide scientific relativity to what Abdul Baha was saying, I was very excited. So I am going to share a very short video with you all from Dr. Joe Dispenza. And what he is talking about here is how it is that we go through the world. And I did something wrong. Okay. How it is that we move in the world. And often we feel like life happens to us instead of us creating our own reality. And if we truly believed that we were the creators of our reality, how would we live our lives? So a very dear friend, and when I was going through a dark night of the soul, sent me a talk from Dr. Joe Dispenza, and it really helped turn things around for me. So this is a very short clip that I want to share with you. And I seem to have, here we go.
How many people in this audience actually believe in the idea that the way you think has some effect on your life? So how many people here actually woke up this morning and consciously created a future? You know, the biggest reason why people don't do it is because you don't really believe it's true. You see, if you knew on a gut level that it was absolutely true, would you ever miss a day? Come on. And would you ever let any thought slip by your awareness that you didn't want to experience? So if you believe this, then does your environment control your thinking, or does your thinking control your environment? So if you wake up in the morning and you get out of bed on the same exact side as you did the day before, you shut the alarm clock off with the same finger, you slip into your favorite slippers, you shuffle into the bathroom and you use the toilet like you always do, then you get into the shower and you wash yourself in the same routine way, then you groom yourself to look like everybody expects you to look, then you go downstairs and you drink coffee out of your favorite mug. Then you drive to work the same way as you did the day before. You see the same people that push the same emotional buttons. You do the exact thing that you know how to do and you memorize and can do so well that you're an expert at. Then you hurry up and rush home so you can hurry up and check your emails, so you could hurry up and go to bed, so you could hurry up and do it all over again. Now, here's my question. Did your brain change at all that day? We could say that you were thinking the same thoughts, performing the same actions, that create the same experiences, that produce the same emotions, but secretly expecting something to change in your life. As you see the same people and go to the same places and do the same things at the same time, it's the external environment that's turning on different circuits in your brain, causing you to think equal to everything that you know. And as long as you think equal to everything that's familiar or known to you, what do you keep creating more of? Same life. Now, the quantum law is still applying to you. You're just thinking equal to everything that you know, and you keep creating more of the same. To change, to truly change, is to think greater than your environment. And every great person in history knew this. Whether it was William Wallace or Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Queen Elizabeth I or Joan of Arc, they all had a vision. They all had an idea. Couldn't see it, couldn't smell it, couldn't taste it, couldn't feel it, but it was alive in their mind. It was so alive in their mind that they began to live as if that reality was actually happening now. So can you believe in a future that you can't see or experience with your senses yet, but you've thought about enough times in your mind that your brain is literally changed to look like the event has already happened? Neuroscience says it's absolutely possible. 95% of who you are by the time you're 35 years old is a set of memorized behaviors, set of emotional reactions, beliefs, perceptions, attitudes that run just like a computer program. So 5% of your conscious mind begins to work against 95% of what you've memorized. So the person wants to think positively, but they're feeling negatively. They want to create their dream board, and put up their future life, but they feel unworthy. That's mind and body in opposition. We have to recondition the body to a new mind. To change your mind, then, is to make the brain work in new sequences and new patterns and new combinations, to begin to make the brain work differently. And the one ingredient that allows us to do that is knowledge or information. Because every time you learn something new, you make a new connection in your brain. That's what learning is. Learning is forging new connections. Remembering is maintaining or sustaining those connections. Write down the choices you have to stop making. Look at the things you have to stop doing. Do you complain? Do you make excuses? Do you blame other people? What do you do? List those things and be really honest with yourself. What experiences do you have to stay away from certain people at certain times and places? Stay away from them so that you are not in the environment that triggers it.
So I mentioned I am face down on the mat. The ice cream pasteurizer, I couldn't even make ice cream. I had to do it on stovetop, which took 5 times longer than it did in my pasteurizer and more work. The ice maker, the espresso machine, and all of this happened literally within a 2-week period. My front door, I had these 2 beautiful, huge white glass doors that opened out to the street. One of them got stuck open, and the locksmith came by and told me that it would be $1,200 to shut the door, and he was not sure that that would fix it. And I was just like, I give up. I get it, God. Like, I'm not supposed to be doing this, but we had a lease and I couldn't just shut down the cafe because I didn't have the money. I had to keep it going to try to sell it, to try to do something, because we had to pay the lease whether we were open or not. And I went home and I was in the darkest night of my life to that point, knock on wood. And I called a dear confidant and friend, and I was crying, and I just, unburdened my soul to her. And she listened lovingly. And she said to me, Faith, I am so sorry that you are going through this. I've got nothing for you. And it was just like, what? This was who I went to for, wisdom and advice and spiritual upliftment. And for her to tell me, I've got nothing for you, almost felt like a slap in the face. And I went to bed that night just crying and beseeching God and praying and meditating. And, I woke up the next morning crying and praying and meditating. And it was interesting because what that caused me to do was to go into prayer and meditation in a way that I've never done before. And I realized two things that morning. I realized that I could only control two things. I could control my actions and I could control my reactions to things, and everything else was not my business. And that's a hard thing to accept as a business owner, because I had 15 staff members, between my two businesses. I had a mountain load of pressure on me. So to realize that I could only control my actions and my reactions was, oh boy, how do you do that? So I am introduced to Dr. Joe's work, and he had written a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And I thought, my God, I really need to break the habit of being myself. I am miserable right now. And I started reading this book, and I started finding ways outside of my own reality, going back to that original test, that original quote where Abdul Baha is talking about how tests try us and develop us. If anyone had ever told me that I would find a way to find divine happiness in that place, I would have thought they were crazy. Because what we are taught is that our circumstances create our mindset, instead of being taught that our mindset often creates our circumstances. So this is something that I think, when we look at how we move in the world and what we do, we have to understand that a lot of what we give out energetically is what we attract to us. And that's a hard pill to swallow for many of us, because we live often as the victim of our circumstances instead of the creators of our reality. So when Dr. Joe was just saying, would you ever miss a day? What he was talking about was meditation, and how it is through the act of meditation that we create our reality. So I finally am able to shut down the cafe. You see a beautiful portrait behind me. That is my other father, Peter Ketches. Peter Ketches was a 38th generation Lakota medicine man, married to my mother for 28 years. Sadly, he passed in 2018. But he was passing during all of this happening in my life as well. And I was actually listening to the audiobook of Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself and listening to clips. I was finally able to find a resolution and shut down the cafe. And about 4 months later in May, I was on my way from Washington, D.C. to New York. And I got on the bus with my computer, and I'm thinking I'm going to get some work done. It's a 4.5-hour trip. And the internet was down. And I thought, what am I going to do with myself for 4.5 hours? Reading on a bus can make you motion sickness and all that kind of stuff. So I'd remembered a year prior, I'd been listening to Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, and I'd been saving audio clips. And as I was saving those audio clips, I thought, I should refresh myself what I'd learned last year and then pick up from there to go on and listen to the rest of this book. And he gave a formula that was very significant. So I'm going to share that here. And the formula that he gave talked about how it is that we create our reality. So here he says, what you have to do is set a clear intention and match that intention with an elevated emotion of how you would feel had that intention already come true. And he says, when you do this, as you send the intention out into the world, you yourself become a magnet to attract that to you. And I thought, oh my gosh, when I was a teenager, I had read for the first time, I was probably 13 or 14 years old, and I'd read for the first time Shoghi Effendi's 5 Steps to Prayer. So I want to take you through that here. Step 1, he says, pray and meditate about it. Use the prayers of the manifestations as they have the greatest power. Then remain in the silence of contemplation for a few minutes. One of the things that I've noticed growing up in the Baha'i community is that we do a really good job with prayer, but I don't know many people who meditate. So, learning about this was very powerful to me because it's like, so often we'll sit down and say prayers, but how often do we then sit in silent contemplation and meditate about it? In step 2, Shoghi Effendi says, arrive at a decision and hold this. This decision is usually born during the contemplation. It may seem almost impossible of accomplishment, but if it seems to be the answer to a prayer or a way of solving the problem, then immediately take the next step. Step 3, have determination to carry the decision through. Many fail here. The decision, budding into determination, is blighted and instead becomes a wish or a vague longing. When determination is born, immediately take the next step. Step 4, have faith and confidence that the power will flow through you, the right way will appear, the door will open, the right thought, the right message, the right principle, or the right book will be given to you. Have confidence, and the right thing will come to your need. Then, as you rise from prayer, take at once the 5th step. Step 5, act as though it had all been answered. Then act with tireless, ceaseless energy. And as you act, you yourself will become a magnet, which will attract more power to your being until you become an unobstructed channel for the divine power to flow through you. Many pray, but do not remain for the last half of the 1st step. Some who meditate arrive at a decision but fail to hold it. Few have the determination to carry the decision through. Still fewer have the confidence that the right thing will come to their need. But how many remember to act as though it had already been answered? How true are these words? Greater than the prayer is the spirit in which it is uttered, and greater than the way it is uttered is the spirit in which it is carried out. I couldn't believe it because as someone being 14, 15 years old, reading this quote all my life, I wondered, how do I act as though it had already happened? Like, I'm not a good actress. I don't like to pretend. And here I'm on this bus and I'm hearing this formula of, wait a minute, he's telling me exactly how to do what Shoghi Effendi told me to do. Do you remember the formula? It is set an intention and then act as though it has already been achieved, and that you have to live in the emotional vibrational frequency. So let's say I want my dream job. How am I going to feel once I have that dream job? I'm going to be joyous. I'm going to be exhilarated. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be inspired. I'm going to feel a sense of freedom because I'm living the life exactly that I want to live. Well, most of us wait until we get the dream job to behave in that way. But what Shoghi Effendi is telling us, and what Dr. Joe is proving scientifically and through all kinds of experiments, is that's not the way it works. You have to live in those emotions to draw. Both of them use the word magnet. You draw that to you. So how we think and how we feel is so important in creating our reality. It is really the only way to create what it is that we want. But how many of us struggle with mindset? Just a show of hands. Yeah, right? We all struggle. That 95% of that subconscious program that's running in the background, like that messes with us, our childhood traumas or even adult traumas. Like we ruminate on things over and over and over again. But how often do we kind of go, well, wait a minute, I've been thinking about this for the last hour about all my problems. How do I change that thought? So it was during this time that I was introduced to Trevor Moawad. And Trevor Moawad is a mindfulness expert. And I think all of us are adults on this page. And so I'm gonna apologize ahead of time, but there's a little cussing in this video, but the video is so powerful. I know this is a Sunday worship program, but I think we can all handle a little bit of I want to introduce a short clip of Trevor Moawad. And this is really talking about mindset and how it is that we create, once again, our reality based on what it is that we think about. I do this every time. I forget to make it smaller because it won't share until I undo it. So forgive me for the little Zoom glitching. Thank you for your patience.
Just saying, it's a skill.
It feels wrong.
It's a skill that's hard. It's difficult because it's so easy to come off arrogant.
Yeah, I'm
but it's
sweating.
also
I got like a hot sweat right now.
That's what I love about people like you, man, is you just genuinely do not like to do it. Okay, I think this is a good time to tell the story.
Yeah.
And I want to preface by saying you told this at the dinner. And at the dinner, you spoke for 5 minutes. But this, I was like, no way. And I went and told everyone the rest of the week.
Yeah.
And then I called you back yesterday. I'm like, bro, was that story real? Because I've been telling it all week.
Right.
And I think the reason why it's so good to tell is it's the epitome, in a very understandable, entertaining way, why mindset is so important.
Right.
Give it to us.
Well, this focuses on this idea of something called the Pygmalion effect. And so the Pygmalion effect is very real, right? So as it was told to me by my dad, and there's a speaker series that anybody on this podcast could get involved with called Toastmasters. Mm-hmm. And Toastmasters is an international group that there's a Toastmasters LA, there's a Toastmasters Arizona, where you can, sign up and be a part of local groups and you work on speaking. Not improv, but kind of like that. And it's a professional speaking group. Then they have national events. Well, my dad, had a chance to hear one of the top magazine entrepreneurs tell a story at an international Toastmasters event. And he would share the story with me as a really kind of two pivotal moments that really jump out at me in my life to understand the power of our own behavior.
Yeah.
So this guy was a high school student who was a fuck up, right? And he was struggling and he was about to get kicked out of high school. So if you could do it wrong, he was doing it.
Yeah.
But in the 80s, there was a test, and a lot of people would know it, called the SAT. Mm-hmm. And the SAT, it's been modified since, but back then it had two parts, math and verbal, 800 points. He promised his mom he would take the test. Okay, so he takes the test. He expects nothing, but he takes it for his mom. And he takes it in May, gets his score back in June, and to the surprise of everybody, he gets a 1480 out of 1,600. So his mother, as I shared with you, doing what any mother would do, she said, did you cheat? Right? Because she knows her son and he must have cheated because the score isn't in alignment with who he was.
Yeah.
Or in psychological terms, it would be called cognitive dissonance,
Yeah.
right? Where you see an outcome that's different than who you think you are.
Yeah.
He said he tried to cheat, right? But the spacing of the chairs was too much. The numbers were too small on the number 2 pencil that he literally took the test. She said, you mean to tell me you're that smart? He said, all I can tell you is I took the test. So he's fucked up, but he also recognizes like, oh, I might be smart.
Yeah.
So now he's weaponized in a different way. So because he thinks he's smart, he says, because I'm smart, I'm going to go to class as a senior. He's still enrolled. Well, now he goes to class. He doesn't hang out with who he used to when he didn't go to class.
Yeah, the dumb kids, because now he's a smart kid.
Right?
Yeah.
And so teachers see him and said, you know what, maybe we missed the boat on him.
Yeah.
Right? So he graduates, goes to a community college, goes on to a 4-year, and then ultimately goes on to the Ivy League. And as the story is told, becomes one of the top most successful magazine entrepreneurs. So you hear like, okay, well, obviously he had the gifts. He just had never unlocked them. And this test just caught him on a good day and he got behind the real gifts he had. And he says, no, that's not the story. He said, the story starts 12 years later. I get a letter in the mail from Princeton, New Jersey. Don't think anything about it. And next day, his wife says, you're going to open it. He opens it. Well, it turns out the SAT board, which is true, which happens every year, reviews their test-taking procedures and policies. The year he took the test, he was one of 13 people, sent the wrong SAT score.
Yeah.
The actual score was a 740 out of 1,600. And as my dad would say, the whole crowd gasps, right? The whole crowd gasps. And he says, people want to say it's the 1480 that changed my life. When in true, acting like a 1480 is what changed my life. And what does a 1480 do? They go to class.
Yeah.
So,
damn it, that's good.
What it tells people is that your behavior, not your aptitude, defines you.
Yeah.
And what we think our aptitude is shapes our behavior.
Yeah.
So what is unique about Russell Wilson is that although other people
Our mindset is so vital in how we move in the world. And interestingly, Abdu'l-Baha, who is the son of the prophet, founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah, talks a lot about how it is that we should live in this world. And as I mentioned, him saying the reality of man is his thought had a great impact on me. But there are so many other writings in addition that also, again, I thought were kind of spiritual and esoteric and somewhere out here in this woo-woo mystical world. But when it comes right down to it, I realized it's quite literal, these teachings. So I want to go back and share a few quotes about how it is that we are asked to look at the world and how to reframe our thoughts from Abdu'l-Baha. And I'm also wanting to share a little bit about what he and Baha'u'llah say about meditation, the importance of meditation. So Abdu'l-Baha says, reflect upon the inner realities of the universe, the secret wisdoms involved, the enigmas, the interrelationships, the rules that govern all. For every part of the universe is connected with every other part by ties that are very powerful, an advent of no imbalance, nor any slacking whatsoever. And actually, I found a new little video that I think is so powerful. And right there, Abdu'l-Baha is talking about the interconnectedness of everything, right? Who is familiar with what a metronome is? Is anybody? A few people? Okay. So do you know how metronomes sync, even though they start out of sync? I want to show a little video with you to highlight this really incredible thing. And what I want you to think about while we're watching this video is how it is that we as human beings impact one another. So when we walk into a space, whatever energy it is that we are bringing, how do we impact everyone else that is also in that space? And I think this example of metronomes really help us understand how important being intentional with how we walk into a space is needed. I want you to specifically look and realize that these metronomes are off by at least 17 seconds in the beginning of this video. So there's really, it's very interesting to see how this unfolds. Notice here, far over on the right-hand side, how although it is off, it's off exactly in exact proportion to the other side. So when one side is furthest to the right, the other side is furthest to the left. But it's still in sync, interestingly. Can you believe how they got completely in sync? That video goes on for another minute, but just showing the, so if you think about electronics and how electronics can do that, think about how we impact one another as human beings. And how do we get in sync with one another? That it's a law of the universe, really. And so I just, I didn't want to play the last video because it's just showing you how for the next minute they're completely in sync with one another. But it's so important for us to understand how it is that we move in the world, what we think about, how our energy is. All of these things are very real all of these things are very real and how we impact the world that we live in. So I am going back to my PowerPoint presentation. And again, it's very interesting. I don't seem to understand the way Zoom works because I do this presentation quite often, although I change it up every single time. And for some reason, when I don't, when I start it in full screen, it won't go back. So I have to constantly go back to it in this way. Okay. So hopefully it will not take me back to the beginning. And it does. Just gonna scroll through very quickly. Okay, so Abdu'l-Baha says, I charge you all that each one of you concentrate all the thoughts of your heart on love and unity. When a thought of war comes, oppose it by a stronger thought of peace. A thought of hatred must be destroyed by a more powerful thought of love. Thoughts of war bring destruction to all harmony, well-being, restfulness, and content. Thoughts of love are constructed of brotherhood, peace, friendship, and happiness. Nothing is impossible to the divine benevolence of God. He goes on to say, if you desire with all your heart friendship with every race on earth, your thought, spiritual and positive, will spread. It will become the desire of others, growing stronger and stronger until it reaches the minds of all men. Do not despair. Work steadily. Sincerity and love will conquer hate. How many seemingly impossible events are coming to pass in these days? Set your faces steadily towards the light of the world. Show love to all. Love is the breath of the Holy Spirit and the heart of man. Take courage. God never forsakes his children who strive and work and pray. Let your hearts be filled with the strenuous desire that tranquility and harmony may encircle all this warring world. So will success crown your efforts, and with the universal brotherhood will come the kingdom of God and peace and goodwill. You know, I think about this. When a thought of war comes, oppose it by a stronger thought of peace. A thought of hatred must be destroyed by a more positive thought of love. There was something else that my mother taught me growing up, and that was that Abdu'l-Baha said that when a man has 10 qualities and 9 of them are bad, but 1 of them are good, focus on the one that is good. And last year, I had a distant family member make a racist comment on social media. And if you know me, you know that my life's work has been in trying to eliminate racism and promote the oneness of the world of humanity. And for 3 days, I was judging this person. Like, I can't believe, and I just, like, it was kind of on repeat in my head. And I heard my mother, you know, speaking in my ear, like, when a man has 10 qualities and 9 of them are bad, 1 of them are good, focus on the one that's good. And I thought, boy, I'm the one that's in the wrong here. For 3 days, I've been judging this person. And I thought, what is that one good quality I can think about this person? And I came up with 5. And ever since that moment, I have no longer judged that individual. And I've remembered those 5 other good qualities that they have. So when Abdu'l-Baha is saying this, it is literal. And the science of what is happening, brain chemistry, even body chemistry within us, is very powerful. It's very interesting. You know, we are told to pray and meditate every day, in the morning and in the evening, or at least to pray and read from the writings. How does that change the chemistry within the cellular makeup of our bodies? And these are the things that we don't focus very much on, because we focus very much in this material world that we live in, but it is the spirit that drives all. And so it was during this period that I really was able to come out of this dark night of the soul. I was telling you about my trip to New York. I got online, I was like, I want to go to an event of Dr. Joe Dispenza's. I want to know more about what it is that he's teaching, because one of the principles of the Baha'i faith is the harmony of science and religion. So to me, it was a beautiful marriage of how is it that I go to understanding the science behind spirituality. And there's a few people that are doing that in a really incredible way. Dr. Joe Dispenza is one of them. Greg Braden is another. I mean, there are many, but these are the people that I've happened to fall upon. And going back to that video that I showed in Mindset, like, it is really incredible how we create our reality based on what we think about ourselves. So, you know, I told you how it is that I change the record when I'm thinking about someone else, but what do we do for ourselves when we are struggling and we are judging ourselves, or we think we are less than? Do we know how to turn that around? Do we know how to reach for another thought of upliftment instead of oppression? That is something that is so key and vital and important in this world. And I think prayer and meditation are two ways to do that. So I am going to go back to my quotes. And again, I apologize for having to scroll through all of them. Again, I'll go quickly. Oh, that time it opened up right. So here's some more things that Abdu'l-Baha has taught regarding meditation. He says, some thoughts may be of little or no use. They are like waves moving in the sea without result. But if the faculty of meditation is bathed in the inner light and characterized with divine attributes, the results will be confirmed. And then later, the Universal House of Justice, which is the world governing body of the current Baha'i community, says in his talks, Abdu'l-Baha describes prayer as conversation with God. And concerning meditation, he says that while you meditate, you are speaking with your spirit. In that state of mind, you put certain questions to your spirit, and the spirit answers. The light breaks forth, and the reality is revealed. Baha'u'llah has written, meditate profoundly, that the secret of things unseen may be revealed unto you, that you may inhale the sweetness of a spiritual and imperishable fragrance, and that you may acknowledge the truth, so that light may be distinguished from darkness, truth from falsehood, right from wrong, guidance from error, happiness from misery, and roses from thorns. So I got to go to a weekend event that Dr. Joe Dispenza gave. It was incredible to really, I think all of us learn really well through stories. And so I'm in New York, and I was actually on my way to visit the same girlfriend who sent me the original Dr. Joe Dispenza quote. So it was a neat synchronicity as far as that was concerned. And it turned out that he was having a live event in Lima, Peru, 2 weeks later. Actually, it was more like 10 days. And I just finished a really good week at the convention center. So I didn't have money in my pocket, but it was coming in. And the event was pretty reasonable as far as, how much it would cost to do the event itself, and then airfare and all of that stuff. My brother was getting ready to have his first child. And so I was already going to Florida, and it was, I could come back through the other way, so I could apply that. And I'm in New York, and I get on the train to go in and spend the day with my nieces. And I'm meditating from the train ride. And usually I just try to clear my mind and pray. But this day I decided, you know what, I'm going to put Dr. Joe Dispenza's formula into practice. And I'm going to live in gratitude and joy for these 15 minutes of my meditation. And I put on some meditation music, and I'm sitting on the train with my earbuds, and tears are rolling down my face because I feel so much gratitude and I feel so much joy. And it's funny, the night before I was watching the news and I saw that Oprah was in New York that weekend. And I've just, ever since I was 14 years old, I've had a thing about Oprah. Like, I believed as a 14-year-old that someday we were going to be friends. A 14-year-old believes things like that. And I was like, wouldn't it be cool if I ran into Oprah on the streets of New York this weekend as I'm, there with my nieces? And we had an amazing day, and it was beautiful, but me and one of my nieces needed to rush back to DC the next day because I had a job coming up. And I was feeling like, can I go to Lima? I really want to. I think it'd be really helpful for me, but, is it responsible? And do I really have the money? And, I was just going through all of these questions in my head. And when I got back for my job, they asked me to open up a second kiosk. I'd had one planned, but they asked me to open up a second. And having that second kiosk open, I made exactly enough money for the entirety of my trip within $50. And on Monday morning, one of my staff member comes in about 40 minutes late. And I said, I really appreciate you working with me, but I can't run a business when people come in this late. And I really need you to get here on time. And he said, yeah, Miss Faith, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm trying, but, with Oprah being here, it was really hard to get in the building. I was just like, I didn't even have to run into her. She came to me. And it's really powerful how those things work. But it really, like what Dr. Joe Dispenza was saying in that original video that I showed, when we feel unworthy or when we are living under stress and under pressure and under feeling overwhelmed by the world, it's really hard to bring about feelings of gratitude and peace and joy and love. But when we pray and when we meditate, we can create those things. We do not have to allow our circumstances to dictate how it is that we feel. And the more we create our own reality, the more things change. So one of the things that Dr. Joe Dispenza has done a lot, and I'm just going to refer to him as Dr. Joe, as we in the Dr. Joe community do. One of the things that he has done is a ton of scientific research to kind of say, this is something that is real. And they've taken maids who are from Mexico or Central America or South America, don't necessarily speak a lot of English, and they divided the maids in half. And they had one set that continued doing their work the way they had always done it. They took the other set and they pulled them aside and they said, all the work that you do every day is actually exercise. And, the Food and Drug Administration, says that you should exercise for so many, hours a week. And if you change your diet just a little bit, all these things can happen. But they didn't actually talk about the diet thing. They only talked about the exercise. And after 1 month, the group of maids who continued working on as they always had, their bodies were exactly the same. The group of maids who all of a sudden knew that this was now considered exercise, all lost weight and inches off their body. Not inches, but like their body was a little different. It was only 30 days. And it was an average between 5 and 10 pounds. So it was significant. So, another study they did, they took a group of 80-year-old men and they created a conference center that they asked these men to behave like they were 22 years younger. And as they were asking them to behave as though they were 22 years younger, they'd put up pictures of Marilyn Monroe, and they only had television programming that was of 22 years before. And they only played music that was of 22 years before. And they had taken measurements of their fingers and how tall they were and how they could, how they moved and all this stuff. After 7 days of pretending that they were 22 years younger, their fingers had grown in length, their stamina had increased, they were able to move without a walker. They were actually out playing tag football. Like, this stuff is backed up. So what Abdu'l-Baha is saying is absolutely backed up with scientific research. Okay, let's talk about functional brain scans. That's another thing that he's done. He's taken functional brain scans and he's said, okay, let's take someone who is practicing scales on a piano. And every day for an hour a day for 4 weeks, this one group is practicing scales on not on a piano, just with their fingers, what it should be on their countertop. Another group, they were asked to do the exact same thing. And this, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen for this. They were asked to do the exact same thing. And this group, when they looked at the physical changes that were taking place, the functional brain scan showed that there were physical changes in the brain and that they had grown new networks of neurons, which proves if you pay attention and keep doing it over and over again, your brain starts to fire and wire together. There was the second group with the same experiment, as I said, but rather than moving their fingers, they only rehearsed it in their heads. So they did not move their fingers at all. And at the end of the brain scan, it showed that they grew the same amount of new neurological networks, new circuits in the brain as the group who had practiced with their fingers. The brain does not know the difference between what is actually happening and what is only happening in the brain. In other words, the brain looks like the activity has already happened. So it begs the question, what do you mentally rehearse all day long? There's also something called neuroplasticity and how that changes the body. Here, they took a group of college students and had them pull a string for an hour a day for 4 weeks. Then they had another group do the exact same exercise. However, these students never moved. They were instructed to visualize it with in their minds for 1 hour a day for 4 weeks. They then tested both groups. The people who pulled the string had an increase in their muscle strength by 30%. The students who only mentally rehearsed it had a muscle increase by 22%. These things are very real in our society today. We are finding more and more scientific evidence to show that stress creates disease in the body. So if stress creates disease in the body, can prayer and meditation and changing our mindset create health? And science is proving that it can. So I want to show you what happens when we learn something in the brain. Dr. Joe has done all kinds of brain mapping experiments. And one of the things is when we learn something new, but we can't then tell someone else what it is that we learned, that learning tried to fire and wire, but really it just kind of tried to attach and then detached. So it's really important whenever you learn something new to be able to re-explain it. So this is a short video that shows what is happening in the brain when you are learning something new. And when you learn something new, in this example that he's giving, it's also the pruning away of old thoughts. So this is really key to everything that we're talking about here today as well. I did it again. I apologize. I have to make it smaller on the other screen before I can share. Thank you for your patience again.
So this is the most important slide of the day. It says nerve cells that no longer fire together no longer wire together. That's called the universal law. You don't use it, you lose it. I call this the science of changing your mind or throwing out the mental trash. Here we go. You're sitting now and you're going to create a new future, and you start thinking, okay, what would it be like to be happy, or what would it be like to be healthy? And you're going to fire this new thought, so you close your eyes, you eliminate the external environment, you put your body away, and you're going to get beyond time. So here's the new thought right here. This blue neuron called I am healthy, or I am happy. So you sit down and you close your eyes and you start to fire this thought. And as you fire this new thought, you are activating a new level of mind. And as you begin to fire this thought, you got to seal the connection. But there's only one problem. You've been firing and wiring a lot of other thoughts. And as you're in the midst of creating your own joy and your own happiness or your own health, all of a sudden you hear these voices in your head. You're not happy. You'll never change. You're a slob. You're too old. It's never going to work. That's the chatter that's been going on. And so all these other circuits have been happening behind the scenes of your awareness because they're subconscious automatic programs. And now you become very conscious of them when you're in the midst of change. So while all of this chatter is going on in your head, you have this one element called your will. And your will is connected to your spirit. And if you keep firing that same thought over and over again and restraining those other thoughts, if you keep doing it over and over again by the law of repetition, sooner or later, what's going to happen? That's going to become the loudest voice in your head or the strongest signal in that neuron. The moment it becomes the strongest signal, I am healthy, becomes the loudest voice in your head, and now you're firing this circuit, and it has to be sealed. You with me? But if you're going to seal the circuit, the thought travels down in this direction called an action potential from this nerve to this nerve, but the glue that seals it travels in the opposite direction. So the glue has got to seal this circuit, but there's only a certain amount of glue going around. So as the brain seals this circuit, it steals the glue from the neighboring circuits. And all of a sudden, there goes the thought that you're too much like your mother, or the pain's never going to go away, or this is what the doctor told you, you have to live with it the rest of your life. And now what's the only signal traveling to your body? I am healthy. How many people understand?
Again, just more scientific evidence about how important it is that we change our mindset, that we realize that the reality of man is his thought. I know we are getting close on time. We usually end by noon. I usually like to take time for questions and answers. However, there is one additional video on prayer that really cements this teaching. So unless someone is just has a burning desire that they need to say something, show me. Otherwise, I'd really like to share this video on prayer from Greg Braden. And, you know, we as people who probably most of us pray in some way, form, or fashion every day and in different ways. Some of us maybe more than others. But do we really believe? Do we truly have faith in what it is that we are praying for? Do we actually believe that what we are praying for can be realized? And I think that, you know, what I've shared from Dr. Joe, what I've shared from Abdul Baha and Shoghi Effendi, and then this last piece from Greg Braden really helps cement to me how important it is that we realize that we have to put this into action. There's a quote from Baha'u'llah that says, "The essence of faith is the fewness of words and the abundance of deeds. He whose words exceeds his deeds, know verily his death is better than his life." So we really have to work on putting together something that shows through action what it is that we do. So is it all right with everyone if I go ahead and share this last video, and then we'll have a few moments for questions and answers. And I believe Sandra told me that although we usually end by noon, if people would like to stick around and have conversation after, we are willing to be here to have those conversations. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone protest, so I am going to go ahead and share this last piece on prayer. It's so powerful. And if any of you would like these videos, you can send me an email. My email is my first and last name @gmail.com. So just faithholmes@gmail.com. And I'd be happy to share.
In the early 1990s, I had the opportunity to see this mode of prayer, this feeling-based prayer, enacted in a real-time situation. And I'd like to share the story because it perhaps best describes what otherwise is a nebulous concept regarding precisely how feeling-based prayer works in our lives. During the 1990s, early 1990s, the desert Southwest was experiencing one of the worst droughts in history. And a Native American friend of mine invited me to join him one day in a place in the high deserts of northern New Mexico to share in a prayer of rain. He didn't have to ask me twice. I said, you bet, I'd love to participate and see what this prayer is all about. So we met at an agreed upon location, and we hiked through several 100,000 acres of beautiful high mountain desert sage until we came to a place that was so old. Even the people today don't know who built this place. It was essentially a stone circle. And each stone was placed just as it was by the hands of the ancestors so long ago. And it was in this place that my friend began his prayer. What he did was he removed his shoes, stepped into the circle in his bare feet. He honored all of his ancestors. He simply said, all of my ancestors, all of my ancestors. Honored the four directions. He turned his back to me, held his hand in a prayer position for just a few seconds. And then he turned around and looked at me and he said, I'm hungry. Let's go get a bite to eat. And I said, I thought you were going to share this prayer. I thought you were going to pray for rain. And he looked at me and he said, no. He said, because if we prayed for rain, rain could never happen. Because the moment you pray for something to occur, you've just acknowledged that it does not exist in that moment. And I thought about what he said. It made a lot of sense to me. If I say, dear God, please let there be peace in the world, what I'm saying in that moment is that peace isn't there. And I may inadvertently be empowering the very condition that I would like to change. And the same with a healing in my body or the body of my loved ones. So I asked my friend, I said, if you didn't pray for rain just then, what did you just do? What happened when you closed your eyes? And you turned your back to me just for those few moments. And what he said was this. He said, when I closed my eyes, I began to feel the feeling of what it feels like to have rain in our Pueblo village. He said, I smelled the smells of what it smells like when the rain falls off the earthen walls of our buildings. And I felt the feeling of what it feels like with my naked feet in the mud. There's so much mud because there's been so much rain. And he said, in that way, I opened the door to the possibility to bring rain into our world. Well, I think about this mode of prayer a lot. Later that afternoon, something amazing happened. I was watching the weather maps, and the drought that had happened for so long suddenly changed. We saw the high-pressure system move across Utah and then dip down from Colorado into northern New Mexico and make a little U-turn and come right back up. We had rain that night. We had rain all the next day. It rained and rained, and I called my friend. And I asked him, I said, there's so much rain, the valleys are flooding, the roads are flooding. What in the world is going on? And he was quiet just for a moment, and he said, that's the part of the prayer. He said, I never quite figured out. So I have no way of scientifically validating that my friend's prayer had anything to do with that rain. But the correlations are so high. We see it happen so many times, we know there is an effect. 1972, 24 United States cities were used to conduct an experiment where people were trained to feel the feeling of peace in a very specific manner, and they were strategically placed in these cities. Each city had populations over 10,000 people. And these were documented in some of the very well-known TM studies that were done back in the early 70s. And what happened was, during the time that the people were feeling the feelings of peace in the community around them, beyond the buildings where they were having their experience, the communities experienced statistically measurable reductions in crime. Violent crimes against people, traffic accidents declined. In some cities like Chicago, where the stock exchanges, the stock market soared while peace was in place. And when they stopped their prayers, all those statistics reversed. And they did this time and time again to such a degree that the effect could be measured, and it was applied in an even greater experiment that was documented in the Journal of Conflict Resolution, 1988. And this was the experiment. It was called the International Peace Project in the Middle East. And what happened during the Israeli-Lebanese War in the early 1980s, as a result of these earlier studies? People who were trained to feel the feelings of peace were positioned throughout the war-torn areas in Israel and Lebanon. And during the time, what the researchers called the window, the prayer window, when they were feeling, people were trained to feel the feelings of peace in their hearts, when they were feeling those feelings, terrorist activities dropped to zero. Crimes against people declined. Emergency hospital room visits declined. And they tried doing these experiments different times of day, different days of the week, to make sure it wasn't an effect of weeks or weekends or holidays, or different times of the month to make sure it wasn't an effect of lunar cycles affecting people. And when the studies were complete, what they found, although we may not know precisely why this effect happens the way it happens, we know the correlations are so high that when a certain number of people begin to feel the feeling of peace or healing in their bodies in one place, the effect carries into the community beyond the place where these people are. And it is so precise that we now know, the statisticians were able to determine precisely the number of people that are required to kickstart, to jumpstart this kind of an effect. So I'll share the formula, and then I'll describe what that formula means. The effect is first noticed when a certain number of people are participating. And that number, the minimum number, is the square root of 1% of a given population. So what does that mean? If you have a city of 1 million people, for example, you take 1% of 1 million on your little calculator, and then you take the square root of whatever that 1% was, and that number tells you how many people are necessary, the threshold number to begin the effect. Obviously, the more people that participate, the greater the effect. For a city of 1 million people, that number is only about 100. In a world of 6 billion people, the square root of 1% of the given population is only about 8,000 people. 8,000 people, according to these studies, are the number of people, that's all that's required, to feel the feelings of peace in their hearts in a given moment in time, simultaneously, to kickstart, to jumpstart that consciousness linked through the field, as we know the field exists today, before that peace is felt in the world around us.
We have a great power within us. And I think if we truly understood how we impact one another, how we impact the cellular makeup of our own bodies with what we think about, with what we do, we really would change the way we move in the world. And I think, it's beautiful. There are Baha'i communities all over the world who are holding devotional gatherings and children's classes and study circles. And I think if we as a community who were participating in these things really truly believed the impact that we were having, and we put into practice these formulas that these social scientists are teaching us, I really think we'd change the world that we live in. I want to thank you so much for your time and attention, for being here with me today. I'm very honored to see each and every one of you. And I know we have only 2 minutes, but if anyone would like to make any comments or questions, and if you just want to leave, no problem. But if you'd like to stick around and ask any questions, we are happy to provide the space to do that.
I'd like to suggest we go ahead and do our closing prayer, and whoever wants to stay and talk to Faith can do so. And whoever needs to leave can feel free to go. Oh, and also next week, we invite you to join us again next week. Our speaker will be Nason Saba, and his talk will be on social and racial justice. You can reach it through the same Zoom link you used today. Thank you.
Oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy love. Help them, O God, in their endeavor, and grant them strength to serve thee. Oh God, leave them not to themselves. Oh no, but guide their steps by the light of thy knowledge, and cheer
Thank you, my dear friend Eric, for that beautiful prayer. Okay, so for those of you who